바로 이어서 그 오픈스택 파운데이션의 그 조나단 브라이스 키노트 초청드리도록 하겠습니다. 박수 부탁드립니다.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's awesome to be back here in Seoul for another OpenStack Day Korea. Thank you all for having us back. And I don't really speak a lot of Korean, so I couldn't follow everything that was happening up here. But it seemed like we were installing OpenStack with voice commands and wishing happy birthday. So that's a lot to follow. I don't know how I'm gonna what I'm gonna say now. But I am very excited to be here, and it's great to see how this event has grown over the last few years, 4 years or so, and especially to see all of the collaboration that's happening over here among different open source communities. I think that's one area where we definitely see the Korean community kind of showing the rest of the world, how to collaborate and how to bring these technologies together. So I love seeing that, and that's very exciting. To start off with today, I wanted to talk a little bit about the growth that we're seeing in cloud. And I know that Jacek covered a couple of these stats here, so we can go through them quickly. But if we look at just OpenStack, in the last year, in our user survey that we do, we have seen 44% growth year over year in the number of deployments that we catalog, which is incredibly rapid growth, especially 7 years into a project. And I think that the reason is because we're at a point now where the technology has developed and there are thousands of OpenStack clouds around the world. And so people have figured out how to use it, where to use it, how to put it together. And we're kind of through the development phase and into this spike in rapid adoption. 50% of the Fortune 100 runs OpenStack. So those are the biggest companies in the world. But what's really exciting to me is when you look at collectively all of those companies together, they run millions and millions of processors that are managed by OpenStack. So that is a huge footprint that is out there delivering programmable compute, programmable network, programmable storage. And I think that speaks to a larger trend that we see all around the world right now, which is that everything we do as humans is linked to our ability to use compute now. Whether you're in science or finance or government or any industry out there, manufacturing, obviously technology, computing is a key part of everything that we're doing as we continue to move forward as humans. But one of the trends that I think has emerged in the last few years that is also really exciting is that more and more these technology advances happen in open source first. And we certainly saw that with, as the cloud was really starting to take off over the last 10 years, we've seen a lot of open source technologies that have driven the cloud. Even public clouds like AWS make use of many open source technologies in their environments. And then obviously OpenStack and our global community has been a very important part of the cloud industry. And as you look to modern day technologies, things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, the state of the art in that technology space is often happening in open source directly. This is just a handful of projects that are coming from technology leaders all over. TensorFlow is a machine learning framework that came out of Google. Caffe, CNTK, Torch. You go over to the big data side, you've got Spark, Kafka. All of these projects are open source, and they are used by companies all around the world to develop their next generation data management systems. So that is a really cool time for us to all be in technology, because it means that these breakthroughs and these advances are not limited to just a handful of companies or certain countries, but we all have access to use them and to develop them and to move forward the industry. And so that's one of the things that always really excites me about open source. And as you look at these technologies, the other thing that I think is very important is that they are composable. You can put them together and combine them to build more powerful tools as you use them. So if we look at a machine learning example, if we want to train an algorithm to recognize dogs and to recognize what kind of dog it is, we obviously are going to need some computing infrastructure. Preferably that's going to be automated. We're going to have some software that we run on top of that to manage our workloads. And then we're going to have our machine learning algorithms and the machine training that we do along the way. You can do all of that today with open source technologies. We do these OpenStack days all over the world, and in the last month I've been to, I think, 12 or 13 different countries. And everywhere I go, I learn about new use cases. One that was really interesting recently was in Australia, where Commonwealth Bank, which is one of the biggest banks in Australia, is utilizing OpenStack Ironic, to manage bare metal servers, and they're running TensorFlow, and they're using that today inside of their bank to support about 1,500 analysts who are making decisions for credit lending. They're trying to prevent identity theft, and they're doing it with all of these open source tools together. So that's really exciting to see. And that's also what we see happening more and more in the OpenStack community. People taking these technologies, putting them together, combining them to build more powerful tools along the way. At our most recent Global OpenStack Summit in Boston, we actually did a live demo that showed how this worked. We started out with Ironic, managing physical servers, and then we turned those servers into pools of resources. So some of the servers were running Kubernetes to manage containers, some of them were running Nova to manage virtual machines, and some of them were using Ironic to do just straight bare metal servers. And on top of that, we layered other open source tools like Kafka and Spark and Hadoop and the HDFS file system to build out a real-time processing and analysis stream that took Twitter data from the Boston area and filtered through it and determined what kinds of topics people were talking about the most. And that was just an example workload that we put on that. But it was very cool to see how quickly you could build that, deploy that, compose all of those pieces together, and it's all open source for something that is very powerful and very useful today. So I think that's a trend that we see overall. The world needs more access to compute than ever before, and the technology challenges that we're solving more and more are happening in open communities and in open source, and it's creating this extremely useful and powerful kit of tools that we can put together. Now within OpenStack specifically, we were just discussing how it's the 7th birthday of OpenStack, and so we're 7 years into this, and the community has grown a lot. We've had thousands of developers from all over the world. We have community members in about 180 different countries now. And so earlier this year, we had a meeting of the different leadership groups within the OpenStack community. The technical committee, the user committee, the board of directors, people from the OpenStack Foundation staff. And we got together to talk about, what do we need to work on? What do we need to improve as we enter our 7th year and then, continue on from here? And we came up with 5 areas that we were going to focus on over the next year or two. And I want to just talk about these briefly. And if any of these are areas that you are interested in, that you want to be involved in, there are community work groups around each of these areas. So you can join us and you can help us improve these, and that's how we get better in open communities. So the first thing that we talked about was more clearly communicating what is OpenStack. Over the years, OpenStack has grown, and it has added a lot of features, it's added a lot of projects and a lot of people, and sometimes it can be confusing to understand exactly what OpenStack is. But that's something that we really want to be able to clear up this year. And so what we started to do is look at the structure of our projects and map them into their use cases and how they interact with each other. And that's kind of the first step. There's also discussion going on right now about how we organize the development and the code repositories so that it's more clear, what is software that's shipped from OpenStack, things like Nova and Neutron and Cinder, and then what are those extra projects that help you use OpenStack, whether those are Puppet modules or tools to manage containerization, things like that. And so this is a big area of focus that a lot of people are working on. And again, feel free to reach out to me. We also have Lauren Sell and Tom Feifeld from the Foundation here. Find any of us today and tell us if you want to get involved in any of this. The next thing that we talked about was improving the feedback loop. So the feedback loop is how developers write software, users use the software, and as they find problems, how do we make sure that gets fed back into the development process so the software continuously gets better and better. Well, one of the things that we started this year was we changed up the structure of our main OpenStack Summit event to include what we called the forum. And the forum is a set of working sessions that are developed and organized by developers and users together to talk about the most important issues to them. We did this for the first time in Boston, and it was really interesting to see how some topics that on the mailing list and in these different communication channels that we'd been talking about for over a year. But once we got the right people in a room for 40 minutes, we were able to really get to some good answers and solve that when we had both users and operators and developers all in a single room. So this is a big step that we've done there, and we're doing other things. We are updating the format of our working groups, and we're trying to encourage more and more of this collaboration between both operators and developers throughout the development process. So I think this is a really important one too. Another area that some of the development teams have been working on is addressing complexity. If you look at OpenStack, there are a lot of pieces, a lot of features, and it's grown enormously. When we started out, the entirety of OpenStack was about 28,000 lines of code, which is not a very big software project. And now it's more like 6 or 7 million lines of code. So it's grown enormously, and that has brought with it a lot of capabilities, but it has also brought with it complexity. And so it's time to go back and remove features that aren't used, that were kind of put in there either by specific companies or by kind of edge use cases that aren't really viable anymore, and really focus on what the core of the functionality needs to be, what the common config options are that we need to focus on, and then remove some of those projects that are really just sort of extraneous and not super active, not diverse, and reduce the complexity back down to the scope of OpenStack, which is managing compute, storage, and networking, managing those assets in a data center. Another really important one that I think is, again, like I was saying earlier, ties in with this event today is collaborating with adjacent communities. At that summit that I was talking about in Boston, we had what we called open source days, and we had about a dozen other open source projects that came in to the OpenStack Summit, and they were able to have small conferences within the event. And these were really key technologies for many OpenStack users, things like Ceph and Kubernetes and Open vSwitch, and it was really great to have these communities all together and collaborating. And so that's what I love about the OpenStack Day Korea this year is, we have the same thing here, on a smaller scale, but still very big emphasis on collaborating and working together, and that's going to especially continue into tomorrow. So again, thank you to the organizers for working on that for this event. And finally, the fifth area is, as the community has grown and we're 7 years in, we need to make sure that we're continuing to grow new community leaders. OpenStack Day events like this one. This is a picture from the OpenStack Day event in the Netherlands last year. But these are really great times for new people to get involved and to have an opportunity to help organize the event, to help lead sessions, to help do training, and to grow in the community overall. And so thank you all for being here, and I hope that this is a good point for you and your OpenStack journey. Now, to wrap up, I just want to talk about a few more things, and I want to talk specifically about what we're seeing with private cloud. And I think that we're at a big inflection point in cloud usage overall that is driven by what I call second-generation private cloud. When we launched OpenStack 7 years ago, we launched it initially in an environment where everyone was very focused on hyperscale cloud. Extremely large public clouds was kind of the use case that people were thinking about. And what we saw happen over the last 7 years is the community actually delivered a lot of features that were never going to be a priority for hyperscale public clouds. If you think about the features that landed in OpenStack early, things like IPv6. Some of the public clouds are just now supporting IPv6. IPv6 has been in OpenStack for almost 4 years. And that was because a user needed it, and they were able to build it and build that support in. Locality. If you add up the places where we have OpenStack public clouds, it's more than Amazon, Google, and Azure combined in terms of the places that we have public cloud locations around the world. And obviously, if you add up the 100+ countries where we have private clouds, that footprint geographically is even bigger. And so, people were building OpenStack clouds to deliver that. Bare metal servers. Not every workload runs the best on a virtual machine. And so the ability to run a high-performance workload, a data workload, a container workload directly on bare metal was a big advantage. Network functions virtualization is an area where we've seen a lot of adoption around the world in the telecom industry and also in some enterprises. And a real emerging area that we're seeing is with edge computing and edge use cases. And this was something that I'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes, but that was really a big deal at the event in Boston. So, I think that as I said, we've kind of gone from first generation to second generation, and it's really been driven by users and organizations who are building this software into the thing that they need it to be. And if you look at the first generation of cloud, especially private clouds, they were almost 100% focused on compute virtualization, hypervisors. But in the second generation, what we see is that everything is virtualized, the compute, but also the storage, the networking. And as I said, we've actually brought bare metal back into it. We've added in containers. And so there are many technologies that are involved in a cloud now. And a lot of that has been driven by the OpenStack community. We've really changed what it means to do cloud. And if you look at some data from our user survey, we ask people what kinds of workloads are you running on top of your OpenStack cloud. And these are some of the key technologies that people said they were running on top of their clouds. Kubernetes, OpenShift, which is based on Kubernetes, Cloud Foundry, Mesos, Docker Swarm, others, Cloudify, things they built themselves. But what they're doing is they're not just using those clouds to do virtualization, enterprise virtualization. It's not just a replacement for VMware or something like that. They're really doing entirely new workloads. And so that's a big difference from where we were 7 years ago and where we are now. Then if you look at the adoption side of it, the way that OpenStack and private cloud overall has been adopted has changed a lot as well. Early on, the technology was immature, and so it was primarily adopted by technology companies or companies who had really large footprints, and they could save a lot of money or really gain a lot of efficiency by going to it. But as the technology has improved, we see a lot of clouds that are being run by one or two operators, or where a company is outsourcing that to a Red Hat or a Rackspace or a Mirantis or Canonical, and the ecosystem has matured to deliver value at smaller cloud sizes, and I think that's been a really big driver for what we see in terms of the kinds of organizations that are running clouds. If you look at this, you'll see that it's a pretty even distribution across many organization sizes. Sometimes people have this idea, this incorrect idea, that OpenStack is only for really big companies, really large organizations like eBay or Walmart or whoever. But in reality, it's used by organizations of all sizes. And then finally, I think the challenges that people are facing as they adopt cloud, those have changed. In the beginning, it was really hard to find talent, and the technology, as we said, was immature and difficult to use. That has gotten much easier, and there are more options for how you get to that. And so now people are running into cultural problems in their organization, because cloud is not just a technology, but it's really a way of working and a way of delivering IT value. And so culture and processes are the biggest challenge that I hear a lot of companies talking about now. And again, this is where events like these OpenStack days are so valuable, because we can all come together and learn from each other and learn how to better implement these technologies and drive our organizations forward. It's kind of interesting. This is a Forrester analyst research report. It's kind of interesting to look at the data that's out there today. This shows what people said was their primary cloud computing platform. And this was taken at the end of last year, so it's about 6 months old. But again, pretty evenly distributed. About a third of people on public cloud, about a third of people on an internal private cloud, and about a third of people on a hosted private cloud. And so, when I think that if you go back a couple of years, there was a lot of talk about how people were going to go cloud first or cloud only. And they would say, I'm going to run everything I do in the public cloud, or I'm going to only run in private clouds because of security or performance or whatever. I'm never going to use the public cloud. But I've seen that really shift, and this Forrester report backed that up. And I think that really we are living in a world now where people understand that the cloud is a way of automating the infrastructure and consuming their technology, and they're going to have a variety of different cloud platforms that they need to use. We recently launched a new category in our marketplace at openstack.org/marketplace for one of these new cloud categories. It's called Remotely Managed Private Cloud. And this is, you can go find this on our website. There are organizations all over the world who will deliver this. But this gives you a private cloud on premises that is completely managed by another organization. And so it's yet another way to get cloud delivered without having to take on the full burden of management. And so people are looking at this and they're going, there are all of these different options. How do I decide where it goes? What we've seen from a number of companies is they use this framework, we call it the 3 C's, compliance, cost, and capabilities, to evaluate where each workload should run. Some workloads you need to make use of certain capabilities that are only going to be available if you build out a private cloud. Maybe you need to go really fast, and speed to market is the most important thing, and so you're willing to pay a little more to put it on a public cloud. But ultimately, it's really how do you use multi-cloud as an advantage in your business. So I think that this is a big theme that we're seeing, and it's driven by the fact that private clouds are easier, cheaper, they do more than ever before now, and it's really starting to change the behavior of a lot of companies out there. So one last thing to wrap up. I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about edge computing again. Edge computing is a really interesting trend that I'm seeing start to get a lot of traction, and this is driven by just the incredible expansion of the number of devices and the amount of data that we're producing all over the world, not just in data centers now. And it will be impossible for us to push all of that data and to do all of that work into central data centers as we move forward. In Barcelona last October, we talked about the Square Kilometer Array, which is a giant science instrument that's being built in the desert in Western Australia and in South Africa. And when it goes online in a few years, it will produce 5,000 petabytes of data every day. I mean, that's an insane amount of data. And so there's no way for them to take that data from the desert, ship it back to a central data center in Europe, and steady it. So they have to do processing where the data is being produced. And this is, that's an extreme example, but this happens with more and more with smart cars, with sensors, with smart factories. So when you think about edge, sometimes you think just about telecoms and mobile phone providers. But what we've seen is that this is a trend that is affecting manufacturing, it's affecting retail, it's affecting oil and mineral resource companies, and it's something that a lot of organizations in the OpenStack community are starting to work on. We had a little get-together at the summit in Boston to talk about edge, and I thought we were going to probably have 15 people or so. We had just invited some people to talk about edge use cases. We ended up having about 100 people, and it was a great session, a lot of excitement around it. And so we're going to be doing an event in September in San Francisco focused completely on edge. And this is, it's called OpenDev. You can go to opendevconf.com to find out more information if this is something that you're interested in. And if it is, I'd love for you to reach out to me, because I'm trying to collect all of the people who are working on this so that we can work together. A couple of other things. Our next OpenStack Summit will be in Sydney in November of this year, and then following that we will be in Vancouver in May of 2018. So one other or two other reminders. A lot of this data that I showed came from our user survey that we do, and so that's how we get a lot of information about the OpenStack community. So if you're using OpenStack, please go take this survey. You can find it at openstack.org/user-survey. This year, for the first time, we've been able to get it translated into a number of different languages, including Korean. So that should be helpful for everybody who wants to fill the survey out here. And I did want to make a special thank you to Ian Choi and the internationalization team of OpenStack who did that work for us so that we could have the survey in a variety of languages. And then I saw this on a slide earlier, but I'll put it up here too. We've had a lot of certified OpenStack administrators since we launched this exam a year ago. We just recently upgraded the test, so it's on the latest version of OpenStack, and this is something that we've started to see people who are hiring for OpenStack jobs requesting that applicants have this certification. So this is if you're interested in building a career in OpenStack, this is a good thing to pursue. So again, thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming and participating. Thank you especially to the organizing committee here in Korea, and I'm looking forward to having a great OpenStack Day Korea with all of you.